Hi and welcome to another video in the Java by Example series. And today we're going to start a new example. We're going to start an invoice example where we are trying to create... See, we can talk about what we want to accomplish first, and then we're going to speak a bit about Maven, a tool that we will use that is very nice to work with when you work with Java projects. Then we're going to speak a bit about PDFbox and JSON library, and we are going to talk a bit about testing. Seems like I have this a little bit in the wrong order, but that's neither here nor there. So what are we trying to accomplish? We want to create an invoice. We have some invoice data in JSON, and we want to create a header with a logo and a company name, an address, some information about our company, then the invoice header with the date and invoice number, a bill to address and a shipping address. We want to have a block of information about shipping and terms, and then we want the product list, and this list will differ a bit between each examples. We have the 4 standard test examples: 0, 1, a few, a lot, and then we want to do a total summation at the bottom and add some notes. And lastly, we want some message for our customers on this invoice. And we're going to start by creating a new Maven project. And when you create a new Maven project, you could use a plugin in Maven called Archetype. This plugin, Maven, is built on a lot of different plugins. Everything is pluggable in Maven, and this Archetype plugin could create a lot of example projects that you can start from and build different applications in Java. So to start with something in Maven, you type MVN, which is short for Maven, and then you have, in my case, I'm gonna use the batch flag, because then I won't get a few questions on my archetype that I really don't care about. You usually get the question what kind of archetype you want, but I want a standard Java application one, and that is defaulted, and it will ask me about what package name and application name I want. But if I don't specify that, it will set the same package name as the group name and the same name of the application as the artifact ID. And in Maven you have a few new terms. The group ID is a grouping way for Maven projects to group some functionality or different tools into a grouping. So if we take, for instance, a tool we're going to look at later, PDFbox, it has org.apache.pdfbox is the grouping, and then inside there you have the PDFbox main library, you have a fontbox library, and so on. So that's a way of grouping different functionality into each other, and then you have an artifact which is the thing that you built. And in our case, we want everything to be defaulted, so the group name should be the same as our package name, and the artifact ID should be the same as our name of our application. So to generate this new, then we do an archetype generate, and we have a group ID of, let's say, org test sample, or maybe we should say org example invoice, and then we have the artifact idea invoice. So now I have specified everything I need to create a new Maven project, generate it from scratch. We run this, see here if we get a new project or not. It might take a while depending on installations. So now we have this newly generated project, and in this project we have a POM file, which is a standard file for Maven project, and then we have a structure. Maven is very opinionated about how things should look, so in this case we have a structure where we have all our source file, and then we have a main branch and a test branch, and every test, all the tests will be put in the test branch, and you should put all your tests with a similar name as and a similar package structure as your actual application classes. And then you have, in the main, you have your application classes. At the point where you see Java here, so you have main Java, and at that level you also could put another structure. In some cases you have resources, in some cases you have web application, and then you have some web resources, and those will be put in the same level as the main and the test. So test for test resources and main for main resources. And in the POM file, which looks a little bit like this, you have a few interesting information here. We have the project, and in that we have a model version. It's usually 4.0 with this Maven. Then you have a group ID. The model version is actually what model of this artifact, which model is this modeled on. So there have been a previous version of different artifacts. It's not the version of this artifact, it's just the way you are modeling this document. So now we are using the version 4 of that model. And then we see the group ID that we defined and the artifact ID for this artifact. And then we have the packaging for this artifact, which will be a simple jar file. So when we will package our application later on, we will retrieve a jar file. And at the moment we are at the version 1.0 snapshot, which is a way of saying that this is something that we are building on. It's not a finalized version. So when you actually build a release later on, the release will be something that have a finite version number that you could use and rely on, that code will not change. So the snapshot is an easy way of saying that this is something that is evolving over time. And then we have a name of this artifact, and that's the same name as the artifact ID, could be different. And a URL for the Maven repository. These are something that I haven't seen before. I haven't defined these, but I don't see any problem by having those here. You can have your own URL here to say where people could go and find the information about your artifact. But because I'm using a generator from Apache, this they fill in this information for us. And then we have a dependency here for JUnit, and that's the way this test class is written. It's written in JUnit 3.8.1, and I am actually not. I don't really like the old JUnit way of creating tests, so I will use .4 later on, or version 4, but we can look at the version 3. So if we look in this test case here, then you have the JUnit framework with test case and suit. So each test that you will create, it will be extended by a test case. You have to create a suit, and the test app has an assert true. So the only thing this test actually asserts is that true is true, which is a really rigorous test, right? But to change this to a version 4, then we have to look which version is the latest on the 4 branch. Then we can go here and we can search for Maven, JUnit, and we will find that 4.12 seems to be a newer version. You can see here, yeah, seems to be the latest version. And to get 4.12, here you have the full dependency information that you need to put inside of your POM file. But because we have most of this already, we can go back and we can look in the POM file and just change here 4.12, and then we will have that instead. And one interesting thing here is the scope. This JUnit jar file will only be imported and used in a test scope. So only when we run our tests it will be used. It will not be packaged with the final application. It will not be packaged or compiled with the other resources. Another way you could, and some other scopes you could have is compile time scope, and also the default scope. So you have it when your app, it will be bundled with your app. And lastly, we have provided, I think the last scope is. And provided is a scope where you say that this is something that I need during development, but will not be packaged with my application, because this will be provided at runtime or in the running environment. That is very useful when you're writing a web app and you know that a lot of jar files are already available in the web app. For instance, Tomcat has a lot of jar files that it provides, and then you want to say that in my Maven repository I have a few things that I need to pull in order to use them in my project, but when I then push this to production, I don't want it bundled in my jar file, because those will be provided by the web server later on. So let's go and look at how we could package this application or test this application. We go back here, so we go into Invoice, and in Invoice we could type, for instance, compile, just to check if this project will compile at all. And probably because we haven't changed the main sources, it will build successfully. But Maven is built upon different steps. So it has a lot of small steps that it does in succession of each other. So compile is just a stage, and the next stage is something else. And on the Maven page you can see which different stages it could be in. But if you, for instance, say that I want to do a test, then I know that compile will be done before it runs the tests. And if I say that I want to package something, I know that the tests will be run before I get the actual package. So we can try to run tests, for instance. And this silly little test will be run. We could package the application. And we will get the fully built snapshot jar. And if we try to run this snapshot jar, see here, jar. No, we want it in a class path, target, invoice. And then we could do org example invoice app to run it. And then we get hello world. And in our app file, we just have this static main method that says hello world. So that is nothing new for us there. And so how do we then get more things into our POM file then? Because we don't have everything that we need for this project. For instance, we want to create a PDF from a few JSON files. So first I want to copy in some of the JSON files that I will be using, and I have them in this directory below here, I believe. See here, yes. And as I said before, we have the different standard examples. We have an empty JSON, and that's a JSON with a header. We have a bill to address. We have a shipping address that is the same as the billing address. We have some shipping data, and we have a note, and then the invoice rows is empty. So this invoice will be $0 and actually will never be sent because it's not complete. You will never send nothing, but it's a valid test case. And then we have a single row, and here we have the same information as we had before, but different data. And the shipping billing address isn't the same as the shipping address. We have some shipping data, and then we have one row of data. And then we have lots. No, a few. And this is pretty similar as the earlier case. Some differences. And then we have 3 rows. And I think lots, I think that's some hundreds of rows or thousands of rows. And this could be a really tricky one to replicate and create PDFs of. So we'll see how far we get with this. And I also put in some special characters. So I think this should be a Mandarin name. I'm not really sure. I can't read that yet, so don't quote me on that, but put some Unicode characters in just so we see that we can handle that in our work as well. And now we want something to work with. So in order to read these files, we need a JSON library, and in order to create PDFs, we need a PDF library. So we do as we did before, we just Google for it. And I know that a pretty great JSON library is Simple JSON, developed by Google. See here, JSON Simple. I think it's this one. Could be, see if we just do Maven Simple JSON. There we have it, JSON Simple, and 1.1.1 should suffice. This haven't been changed for quite a while, March 2012, but then again JSON is a very simple format, so if you do this right, then you shouldn't require you to change anything. The great thing about this JSON simple is that they have really thought about the different types in a good way. Some JSON libraries, for instance, say that all numbers should be integers and all different float values should be floats. But in their case, they have said that they should be longs and doubles. So you have a bit more data possibilities there, and they handle correct strings, and I think also they should handle Unicode characters correct. And all JSON's libraries doesn't do that, so I like this one quite a lot, and it's uses a good convention as well, a good API. So if we just put this dependency in here in our POM file, and then we need the PDF library. So we go back here, search for Maven and PDF box. That's an open library by Apache for creating PDFs, and PDF box at the moment you have 2.0.2 that is out, so that should be good. Haven't used it to create PDFs before, I have only used it to read PDFs, so this could be interesting for me too, but we'll see. So we put this dependency in here as well. So, and pick some indenting. So that should be good. And if we go back here and say Maven compile, it should compile the new and also fetch everything that we require from the net. So if we go back here, we see that we have this target where all the classes are, and our jar file is here as well. And if we go back here, I don't see that it there. And if we go into M2, CD of course, M2, this is the Maven repository. We can see that we have a lot of different files here that will be linked in. Just to show one of them, we could go into org, Apache, and then we see PDF box again, and here we see that we have the first pass, org, Apache, PDF box, that's the group name, and then we have these different artifacts in this that is required by PDF box. So we have font box, PDF box, and PDF box parent. And I know that font box will handle all the different fonts we will use to create our PDF, and PDF box is more of reading and creating the actual PDFs. And in here you have this 2.2, and lastly you have the information, the POM file for this PDF box, and the jar file that we will use in our project, and Maven will stitch together in our finally created package later on. So if we look at this PDF box POM file, we see here that they have a lot of different resources and plugins that they are using for testing and building this package and they also have a list of different requirements on different dependencies that will be added when we add PDFbox to our application. So it could be really nice to read the dependency tree of each package that you include, because the more package you include, the more dependencies that they actually have, and that will could create a lot of packages that you rely on, and that could make your application larger and also introduce a lot of new bugs if you're not careful. So let's go back to our application here. Let's do a last package. We can look at our target first. The last invoice snapshot that we built, it was about 2000 bytes, so it was quite small. And I think if we package new one and we put in all the dependencies that we now have, see here if it's larger. No, it isn't. Perhaps it doesn't add them until you actually release. Let's see if we have. Seems that we might. It's probably required that we use them before they are bundled. That is quite reasonable. But I think this should be enough for this session. We have now gone through what we want to accomplish with this example. We want to create this PDF with a lot of different elements, using a JSON library to read the JSON data and create PDFs from those JSON files. And we have looked at how to generate a new project with Maven and how to add some dependencies to Maven. We have looked at testing. I think we haven't looked at changing this. I think I forgot that. In the new version of JUnit, it is actually bundled under org JUnit instead of JUnit framework. And if we take all the classes there, we don't require it to extend test case anymore. We don't have to have a super function or a suit. We only need the actual test. So this is a much smaller test class. We have to use annotations to say that this is a test function in our test class or test suit. For each class is a suit, and we have to say that we want to use the assert static classes to assert things. So I think this should work as well. I can try it out fast. Should be quite easily determined. Yeah, it still works. So that's an easy way to change these. If you don't like to add static here, then you could have an import static org JUnit assert, I believe, and then you don't require this one. But I think that's actually uglier. I like to know which class everything is coming from. So if I use a static method on a class, I really want to know which class I used. So I think this is a nicer way of writing them. Could be verbose if you have a lot of assertions, but I rather see something be verboser than unreadable or you miss something. So yeah, so we have looked at testing, and we have looked at the differences between the version 3 of JUnit and version 4 of JUnit, and we have looked at which different JSON files we have. We have the empty or no rows of data, all the way up to a lot of data. And we have tried to run the app, and we have tested the app. So I think that should be, and also we looked at packaging. I think that should be what we talk about today. Thanks for watching, and if you like this content, please give it a like or subscribe. Thank you.